Alright, today we're going to be comparing the 7 Pro to the LG G, not G, but V50 as requested. Alright, so, they're both $300 phones. They both have a premium design on here, so it's pretty interesting. I think it really comes down to a few things, the pros and cons of both phones. So, let's go ahead and talk about hardware. Like I said, both essentially around the same price. So on the V50, you have a glass and metal design, and you also have a glass and metal design on the 7 Pro. So they're matched there. You have an official IP rating on the V50 though, so do note that. But this, you can get this wet, it's just not an official IP rating. I think they both still look good for older flagships, so I was really happy just with how these phones have aged, look-wise and in the hand. I think they still really look good. As far as hardware, there are some hardware differences. So on the OnePlus 7 Pro, you got your mute vibration switch, power button, volume rocker, but there's no headphone jack, USB Type-C, and then you have your stereo speakers. V50, you have a completely flat camera design, which I always want to point out. It's very unique. You also have power button, volume rockers, Google Assistant button, no mute and vibration switch, but you have a headphone jack on the V50. You have a headphone jack with the quad DAC, USB-C, stereo speakers as well. Alright, when you turn both phones around, you will notice, the difference immediately. So on the V50 POLED display, HDR10, 6.4 inches, 1440p, 538 for the PPI. The 7 Pro, again, 6.67 inches, slightly bigger display, 1440p, 516 for the PPI. But you do have a 90 Hz display on the 7 Pro in HDR10 Plus. So you do have that 90 Hz high refresh rate on the 7 Pro. You do not have any of that on the V50. So basically what that means is that you're going to have a smoother experience when you're scrolling, swiping through applications and stuff like that. Everything is going to feel like really smooth. So also there is a big difference here when it comes to just the overall, display, when it comes to having a notch versus not having a notch. So the 7 Pro uses the pop-up camera mechanism. You do have a notch up here, and you have a more edge-to-edge bezel-less experience on the 7 Pro as well, so do note that. So to me, the experience is more immersive. So as far as display quality, we'll give it to the 7 Pro here because one, you have 90 Hertz. Two, you have no notch, no punch hole or anything like that. They're pretty much even in terms of like brightness and overall colors. They pretty much look identical. You can't really tell the difference. And like I said, they're both 1440p displays. But as far as image quality or just the overall display, I give it to the 7 Pro still. Let's talk about software real quick. So you have Oxygen OS on the 7 Pro here, and we're running Android 11, and it's very smooth. Like I said, there is a kind of a ton of customization, not a ton, but you have customization on here, but it finds a really good balance. It's very fast and fluid. I like Oxygen OS. I think it's really nice. It's one of my favorite skins. Like I said, it doesn't have a ton of stuff like a One UI or anything like that. On the V50, you kind of get more of a kind of stock Android feel a little bit. LG has their own little skin on here. In the V50, this is running Android 10, but the V50 was on the update list to get updates from LG. So do note that and look into that. I did a whole video about it. So this phone will get future updates. And this phone is also very fast as far as, the software. Now you will get overall just more security patches and updates on Oxygen OS. They're very good at that. So also do note that as well. So if you're really into just software, I think the Oxygen OS is slightly better to me than LG's skin on here. Now I want to go ahead and talk about the processor. So essentially the same processor, right? Snapdragon 855 on both of these phones. Adreno 640 GPU on both of these phones. I did a full gaming test. They both pretty much performed the same. I think the V50 performed slightly better in Fortnite for some reason, even though they have the same chip. But I probably might need to refresh my 7 Pro, but I did notice that. That was one thing that stood out. But on the 7 Pro, 128 gigs, 6 gigs of RAM base model, and that is the same on the V50, 128 gigs, 6 gigs of RAM on the base model. As far as speed, honestly, you shouldn't notice too much of a difference. V50. V50. So the V50 seems slightly faster than my 7 Pro, but as you can see, it's not like a massive a difference here. I don't think it's anything like super noticeable, but like I said, they're both extremely snappy, both still fast. Now let's try one more tempo run. And like I said, I have full gaming tests, so I'm not gonna go all into the games and stuff like that. But just go ahead and watch those if you want to see all your settings and stuff. They play games fine. Call of Duty, PUBG, you know, you can play fine. But as far as speed, navigating, they're both very fast phones still, so I don't think that's anything you have to worry about. So I actually don't remember which phone has a louder speaker, so we're at max volume. Let's find out. Yeah, the 7 Pro definitely has a louder speaker. It's because the grill that they went with on the V50 is extremely small. That's why I think it doesn't perform as well. If you can see that, hopefully the camera can pick that. You see how small that is compared to the grill on the 7 Pro? Maybe you guys can see. You see, it's like a bigger grill. It just sounds louder to me, so I wasn't a fan of like that really small grill, but they both sound great. I think the 7 Pro does have a better speaker here. But yeah, but again, with the V50, you have the quad DAC, so your audio experience really depends on if you like listening to stuff out loud, or you got your headphones in. Me personally, I love to have the quad DAC. I think it's a really slept on feature. Both of these phones have NFC, so you have that for your mobile payments. They both do. The V50 has the micro SD support. You do not have that on the 7 Pro, so do note that. And as far as getting into your device, so the way you get into your device on the V50, you have face unlock, and then you also have your physical fingerprint sensor. So that works very fast, and honestly, they're about the same speed. Most of the time, a physical one would be faster than this in-display one, but the 7 Pro has extremely fast in-display fingerprint sensor. It's very fast. Now, as far as face unlock, your face unlock is going to be slower because you have, you know, that pop-up camera has to pop up and do that. So, you know, the V50 does not have to do that. So that is one thing to note as well. So as far as getting into your phone, they're both really great. I've never had an issue. All right, let's discuss camera quality starting with the 7 Pro, and I'll let you know which camera I actually prefer here. But on the 7 Pro, we have a triple camera setup. It's a 48 megapixel standard, 8 megapixel telephoto, 16 megapixel ultra wide 4K video, 16 megapixel selfie cam. The 7 Pro still has great cameras, but I like to switch between the G cam and stuff because I think the 7 Pro's colors aren't as good as the V50's. So I really like how the V50 gives off natural colors. I think that's my only complaint with how this camera has aged. But it still takes really good photos, as you can see from the pictures. So definitely still a great phone to take photos with if you're in good lighting. Yeah, so I don't have any issue. Video is fairly solid on here. The selfie cam is fine. I don't have an issue with the 7 Pro's image quality, but like I said, I'm leaning more towards the V50 on terms of image quality. So you have a 12 megapixel standard, 12 megapixel telephoto, and a 16 megapixel ultra wide 4K video, and then a dual camera setup up front, 8 and a 5 megapixel wide selfie, 1080p. I just like like I said, I like the more natural color science that the V50 was giving off. It just does a really great job. To me, great detail, still good depth of field. You get a good selfie camera. It handles overexposure really well. So I'm really happy with the image quality on the V50. It's very close, but like I said, as far as color and how I prefer the video to or the pictures to look when you're just point and shoot, I would go with the V50 for sure. All right, so you do have kind of a awkward situation when it comes to battery life on both of these phones. So on the V50, you do have a 4,000 milliamp battery, 18 watt charging, and then you have wireless charging. And then on the 7 Pro, you have a 4,000 milliamp battery as well. But there's no wireless charging, but you have faster 30-watt charging. So this charges faster, but there's no wireless charging. This charges slower, but there's no fast charging. So it's kind of weird. So, you know, I like the 7 Pro that, you know, it charges really fast, but also wireless charging is very convenient. But as far as battery life, I mean, honestly, they both are all-day phones. I'm never like stressed about battery life when I'm, you know, on a full charge and I leave the house. You know, these phones are perfectly capable of surviving the full day. So yeah, you know, and also one thing to take into consideration is that, of course, the V50 has, you know, 5G as well. You don't have 5G on the 7 Pro unless you get the 5G McLaren model, which is going to cost a little bit more, but not too much more. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. Those are the, you know, pros and cons with each phone. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys in the next one.